I think the coolest people you meet, you will actually never know what the heck they do. On, I think life is about hearing people's stories, and that's something I very, very passionately believe. I recently was at a conference, and one of the doctors spoke. I mean, I guess she's not just a doctor, but healthcare executive, doctor, whatever the title is for this lady. And she was speaking and she was telling, I asked a question and she was like, Mitchell, I know you love to hear the stories of people, but also hearing the stories of people will not get you what you're looking for because you want them to do something for you. You can hear stories, you can get inspired all you want, but you need them to do something for you. At this stage of life, I currently believe it is super, super important to hear people's stories no matter what. And it's not just about what they can do for you, right? She talked about mentorship into sponsorship, which I think is super powerful. But I think to even get there, it is beyond necessary for you to hear and understand somebody's story. I personally believe that when you hear somebody's story, you get an understanding of them and it allows you to deepen that relationship. To be completely honest with you, until I understood my parents' background and until I still learned about their story and things that shaped them, I never understood or even knew my parents. I think there's elements of stories that other things do not encapsulate well at all. I just opened up LinkedIn and this guy I met at Goldie's Barbecue. For context, Goldie Barbecue is the number one barbecue place in Texas. It's like a 5 hour wait, it's a stupidly long line. And he's the vice president of customer this, that at, a Fortune 100 company. Crazy. I just met this random dude at a barbecue line and we just talked about life. He told me about his story. I'm telling him about my journey, this and that, and his friends' skateboards. I really, really, really believe that the act of hearing somebody's story may open up more doors than necessarily knowing exactly what you want to do. But I'm gonna test this theory, right? I think I speak without having certainty. So I think to actually, see, I said it again, to actually come to realization, you must do the things to become certain. Hearing stories allows you to understand, not necessarily understand, it gives you perspective, and perspective is not always understanding. Hearing stories versus becoming and doing the story matters so much. You hear stories, but you don't actually know the parts that shaped them. People may remember key points of their story, but those may not actually be the parts that shaped them. For example, if I tell you about my story and I bring up 2020, the reference point I'm probably going to bring up is having heart surgery. But I'm more than just having heart surgery, right? I just mentioned a story about me meeting somebody at a Goldie's barbecue, and I find out that they're vice president of this, Fortune 100 company. Crazy. Lady I met is telling me a story about her life, and then she's telling me, Mitchell, what can I do for you? I think stories open doors, right? It's the relationship aspect, but doing life together is actually what gets you to what you're looking for. I think sometimes it sounds like these thoughts are not cohesive, but I like going from idea, idea to point. Idea, point, because I want you to come up with the narrative in your brain and understand hopefully what I'm speaking about. I think this is probably super clear and concise, but let's see. Back in the day, whenever I like to read a lot of books about old medieval wars and swordsmen and all these different things, when travelers would walk around, these wandering swordsmen or just travelers in general, they'll travel around, you walk from place to place and you tell stories about this and that. But the story is what brings you together. But then what actually brings you into deeper relationship with somebody is doing something. I think a lot of times we understand, not even understand, we lose the value of somebody because we take it for granted and we don't realize how much they actually shape our story. And I think the things that shape your story are more important than so many things. For example, in high school, I ate peanut butter out of a jar, out of the peanut butter thing. Football practice, they would always force you. You gotta. So varsity practice, they'll always have you, get protein after your workout. I don't have money. I'm like trying to figure out how the heck do I get protein. My football coach, Coach Carp, was like, just buy a jar of peanut butter, keep it in your backpack, and just take a spoonful. And that's what I would just do, spoonful of peanut butter. And those are small things that shape my story. But the thing that actually shapes the story is doing the football practice with Coach Carp. But you remember these highlight points. Stories are, you learn this in English class, the introduction. The biggest point is the climax. There's so many parts of a story, and when we speak, we draw you along and get you to be part of it. That's what a play is. A really immersive story, a really good podcast has you like, wow, oh my goodness. But an even better story is something that you create. And I'm not just talking about writing. The best story you can ever listen to is the story of your life and what you're building. And to go back to the first original point is, when the lady mentioned that it's important to hear people's stories, Mitchell, but it's also important to what can they do for you. Yes, you should hear the stories of people who may, open doors for you, but you never know who may open doors for you until you ask. So essentially the big point of this is put yourself out there, right? Ask about people's journeys. If you're curious, do parts of that journey and see if you don't want or you do want. And even if you don't necessarily want, do until you have the confidence of becoming that. And as you keep going, you will actually make the craziest story. I used to work in different practices, and I'll talk to a lot of geriatric patients, a lot of older people, and they'll talk about, I wish I did this, I wish I did that. And a big thing that got in my head is like, I don't want regrets. I want to have this life, but I also want to live. So I know that I have to form my own story. The whole point of this video is stories are super important. I truly believe that the greatest story is the story of your life. And because you only live it once, you have to embrace this journey and truly breathe. Not just breathe. And I think I'm rambling now, so I'm going to shut up. But the greatest story is the one that you create, and the greatest parts of your story are the small parts that you don't even value yet. You may even forget, but those parts are what make the bigger picture, and we highlight those points. But the small things is actually what shapes and actually creates the story. People want to look at the trophies of the bigger parts. Oh, you got into med school, you got the job. But it's actually the work that comes beforehand and the work that comes afterhand that I think is so important. And that's why I'm interested in your story. I'm not interested in you getting the job. I'm interested in the becoming, the parts of what was necessary for you to get to where you're at. And that's why I think a story is important. And not just a story, your story.